I mean, I've been so busy talking to people, talking to much too many people, and someone actually asked me to make a comment on Aleksandr Dugin, and I have actually made recordings on him. I don't know if I uploaded them, um, because I knew that those recordings, although they were kind of in relative to me, they were short and sweet. They were just sort of half an hour. But you have to understand that Aleksandr Dugin is kind of like a uh, oh my word. You see, this is sort of right at the crux of everything. He's a troll. He's a good-hearted. He's a good-hearted troll. You know. So this is a kind of it's an intellectual kind of false flag thing, which he even explains himself. You know, that is sort of it's a way to actually get people to reason from the ground up. You know, because in fact, and you can even prove this because he is so. It's almost like kind of ethnocentrism, this idea that everyone has their own unique truth or whatever. But I mean, if you actually understand what the original Russian unique truth is, um, it was essentially buried or obscured or sort of diluted by the first revolution, um, or by the 19. Sorry, I don't even know my history dates that well, but you'll know round about what I'm referring. Was it the 1914 revolution? Was that? Um, oh my word! I have these words in my head that connotate to it. I mean, I must say I'm not perhaps so well informed in the detail of it, but I see it from the other side because I see it from sort of the uh, peace and war, or what's it called? War and Peace. Oh my word! The which I mean I believe that I was a part of in producing that miniseries. In fact, I even coached those actors from a young age. I was like, this group of people, you're going to be the love and war people, and you're going to sort of have a certain. I mean, I gave them instruction about how to sort of be proper, So I mean, it's weird how you can kind of get prepare people for a role. I mean, maybe this is just a kind of arrogance and a conceit, that you sort of you let actors mull around with a certain idea in their head for a couple of years at least. If the role is, if you want certain things to get, if you want to get certain things from the role, and isn't, I mean, in the Russian idiom then of the Russian aristocracy, which was very individual, very romance driven, and they were on the cutting edge. Like it is my view that Russia, I mean, many other European powers claim this. The Germans claim that they were the cradle of Western civilization. The Russians claim that Moscow is the cradle of Western civilization. I mean, maybe it's sort of maybe there's some transference, maybe there's some interplay, maybe there's some engagement. I mean, it's Germany was sort of obviously the other great power that was sort of at least next to Russia, or close by. The Germans always had to worry about. They had to feel insecure from all sides. So they were having to sort of be practical on the left side and proper on the right side. And so there's this kind of that you can't afford to have the, what's the word, you're not like the British island nation that has, you just have to invest in a good enough navy, and then perhaps make sure that you've got all the places that landings can occur are sort of well fortified, and you can kind of curb your spending, and you can sort of relax a bit and indulge in the development of culture and art and sort of and sophistication into, let's say, investigation via these channels, whereas other people have to be more regimented. Obviously, I mean, probably the failing of Russia was. I don't want to say that. I actually I don't know enough about military history or whatever, but how good or bad the, I mean, uh, I mean, history, I think, probably has enough examples of people who were led into the ground by generals or, sort of dictators who unilaterally promoted and demoted people based on personal gripes and personal, uh, let's say, features and characteristics. Anyway, but so what is the so-called unique Russian truth? And obviously, I mean, and Dugin, I think himself, is a troll on this point because he even says, we must reject modernity. We must reject everything after modernity, including post-modernity, and we must think again from pre-modernity, and then or actually, does he say actually just modernity? Just only reject modernity, and just look at post-modernity again through equally to pre-modernity, and then make up your mind what you want. Think on it again. Basically, he's saying stop, think on it again. Now think on it afresh. It's a kind of it's a pedagogical ideological bridge essentially that he's handing to people. He's trying to say, you haven't thought this through. You're actually part of a kind of one of the failed sects within modernity, within one of the false lineages, within one of the church splits, because the church splits because like a house divided can't stand, and the people who leave are, which one are the core, if you are part of a schism, who's right and who's wrong, um is what's the decent way to have a schism, and there are lots of different strategies. One of them is that you can just kind of create a collegian kind of composite body that has it all, has somewhat room for it all, and a kind of common vocabulary and parlance to be able to sort of, that people can very easily self-identify. Oh, I'm in the cult of this, or I'm in the idolatry of that, or I'm in the practice of focusing on this, and then everyone is kind of on the same page about, like, uh, it's kind of like saying this is my job description, but in a kind of mythological shorthand or something like that. So I'm somewhat contrasting culture through the metaphor of religion, but more specifically polytheism, and sort of cultural identity or ethnic, pre-modern um, traditional forms of I mean, it's hard even to come up with a stable way of naming this, because in my view it's unnatural. Nationalism, all kinds of, essentially, are we really going to go back to nationalism? I mean, I guess you have to, if you've essentially gone back to, if you have cooked up identity nationalism, then maybe you do have to go back to normal secular nationalism or something like that, which itself always had kooky symbols of history, of religion, which itself, were evidence of, well, at the end of the day, sort of church splits or something like that. The Church of England against the Catholics, and it goes on, it goes on, it goes on. Hmm. So what about Aleksandr Dugin? Um, I don't know. I feel like I've exhausted the topic now. Um, I think that's what's going on there. I mean, it's short and sweet, simple. And I don't like how it's getting in with the politics, though, because I mean, like, there's a war going on, and to tell you the truth, like, I think this war was perhaps correctly instigated by America. I mean, just because things get provoked, and some because one person engineered the war with their deep state in the background doesn't mean, or who engineered it, maybe the Russians engineered it. I mean, they have just as much reason to secure Crimea, which Ukraine has not released, back to them. And I don't want to talk too loudly about this because I am actually sometimes afraid for my life because I have been threatened by oligarchs before. Um, in fact, I mean, I have actually a long history with trying to manage oligarchs. It's like herding cats. And I sort of even prevented bad things from, well, I remember preventing bad things from happening and things like that. And certain arrangements were made, and then certain people went back on their word, which completely changed things. Well, yeah, somebody else made me, essentially reflected on me to break my word, so I was in dishonor, and so I guess, at some point someone has to reclaim their honor, even at the cost of at the risk of one's own life. So I guess maybe I should speak more brashly about this. I mean, I can't go into the detail because it's dangerous for other people for me to provide all the detail to it, but you see, I don't even want to make recordings like this because I don't want to get in the way of things as they are unfolding. Um, but anyway, as we move towards a more multipolar world, which I think will actually, hopefully, be an era of peace. Obviously, it's going to be more contentious in some sense, so management of it is going to sort of be more crucial. Let's say responsible management of politics is going to be more crucial. We're going to have completely differently evolved um, sense making structures and apparati, which is problematic because, what happens if there's a coup somewhere and some general takes over because he's sort of ideologically possessed by some kind of very dangerous, you know, teaching or something like that. There could be the beginning of in a multipolar world, how likely is there to sort of be a domino effect of, sort of uh, falling into World War III? I mean, in a multipolar world, it's more it's more possible than in a unipolar world. In a unipolar world, you can just stop things from happening. You can stop things from precipitating into uncontrollable, unstable, cascading events. Um, so if we do want a multipolar world, because I mean, effectively, there has always been a world government. There's no such thing as that. The idea that world government is an idea that some people are trying to unveil. I mean, the question should be not, how to prevent world government. It's sort of that, how should the League of Nations get on with one another? What should be the common rules, and how should they be enforced? It's pragmatic, which obviously nations have to find a way to do that. And in some sense, you can't really trust some nations because internally they are just so fucking unstable. Like, not on the outside, but maybe on the inside. I mean, do you know what the Chinese people are like? You know what their own leaders say about the Chinese people? Well, it's not even what the leader says. Everyone knows this. It's true about the culture itself. They call it the Chinese glass heart. The glass-hearted Chinese. How many glass-hearted are there? And then we scorn their credit system. We scorn their credit system. Maybe their social credit score system, is a way to invoke a kind of tutelage over these people. Because do we know the first thing about Chinese history and Chinese culture and the Chinese family? We're going to look at it with Western eyes, you know. Think again, think afresh, you know. And then maybe when you do that, I'm not saying that the Chinese are perfect. Maybe you can come up with a good suggestion, and you can come up, you know. Do you think the Chinese haven't tried things? You know, do you think the Chinese haven't? What's the word? What's the word? Sort of prototyped or flagshipped democracies inside some of their provinces. I mean, do you think that they're afraid of freedom? They're afraid of democracy. Do you think that's what they're afraid of? I mean, do you know the history of China, the warring kingdoms? I mean, do you know how fractious it was even to forge a unified, I don't even know what it's called, kingdom, a unified kingdom from five kingdoms? I mean, how many people hated that? How many people, you know, there was a whole movie about it, Hero, you know? This hero was going to come and kill the king, kill the emperor of China. And he walked, and he had every opportunity, and he walked away, and he didn't do it. That was sort of that was sort of the point of the movie, is that no one can kill the emperor of China, because if you wanted to kill him, you have to countenance the alternative. And can you countenance the alternative? Because if you can't, shut the fuck up and sit down and fuck off. I mean, is this? I mean, you have to understand that China. You know, people think that Confucianism and Taoism is lost. It's kind of, well, it's in a. I mean, it certainly is in a different kind of form. I don't know exactly the state that Mao left it in, but I mean, the Chinese still believe that they are the kingdom under heaven. They still believe that they are acting out of morality, and if anyone thinks that, then they are capable of taking counsel, and they are capable of sitting down and hashing it out and talking about it. That's why Taiwan is a problem for China. What do they call it? It's a mark on or of the age of, what do they call it? I can't remember what they call it. The age of embarrassment. You know, it's inheritance of the fact that China is regarded as lowly by the world, as subhuman, as uncivilized. Um, you know, obviously, if you look at the detail of the issue, it's more complicated than that, because, like, what do the people of Taiwan actually want? You know, and are the people of Taiwan going to be essentially, let's say, disabused of their democracy and freedom, so that what? So that they can be cleansed, and so that the internal ideological threat to China is quelled? Or can they be peacefully subsumed so that they can be homogenized? They can say, actually, you're a foreign experiment on our doorstep, but, you know, why don't you try to join the CCP? Why don't all the people in Taiwan, why don't they, you know, sort of induct themselves into politics? I mean, obviously not everyone I'm not saying that every, you know, the Taiwanese political establishment, why don't they try to assimilate themselves, is basically what I'm saying, into the existing structure, and see what they can do to improve it. Maybe they don't even know their own structure that well. I've spoken to people who are lawyers in, I can't remember if it was Taiwan or Hong Kong, but it seemed to me that it must have been Hong Kong, probably, that their understanding of the English common law is not so great. It's not that their understanding of it is bad. It's that the English common law cannot really be properly understood without the context of belonging to the Commonwealth, because a lot of the law itself is inherent in the historical framing of the sovereignty of the let's say the unwritten aspects of the Constitution are needed to bolster the structure of the law. And so it actually cannot be understood. It can only be lived out as a kind of cultural idiom. And that is obviously alien to the Chinese, as it should in fact be alien to anyone who wants to receive something as a foreigner, you know. And so when things come packaged with this kind of, you have to swallow the pill, you know, put your head back, open your throat, it's going all the way down, you know, what is that a metaphor for? I mean, that's a metaphor for some kind of profane sexual indecency. And, you know, so we have all of this kind of posturing, and that kind of posturing and the insecurity around safeguarding that image of your own culture is in some sense a necessary thing in order just to preserve the, let's say, the health of your general population. Because, you know, you don't just live in a society full of lawyers and politicians, you live in a society full of adolescents and children. And, you know, like, they actually need a stable, let's say, fabric that they actually think is connected to something that has within it a port of call to find, you know, excuse me. I mean, I guess in China, I wonder if you can even say this, the Tao, the way. I mean, in this, I actually did, at some point, I wonder if I uploaded it, I actually did do a kind of critique of comparative religion, where I said that sort of, you know, the Western Christianity is on a completely different distribution of structure in belief to Chinese Confucianism and Taoism. Um, is a different distribution, uh, which is in some sense, I think, it's too good. It's too efficient a distribution. So there's a built-in baseline that sort of has the right priorities in order to effect for harmonious political, you know, I mean, this is why, I mean, people, you know, people can't even imagine this when you actually give them this historical fact. When the Huns, I think they were, whatever, when the Huns, you know, sort of killed the Emperor of China, or sort of invaded China, whole villages committed suicide in China when they heard that the lineage of their emperor, because they lived inside their emperor. Conceptually, it was the father of their worldview. Because their life now was void. It had no flow. It had no. It was bedlam. It was mayhem. It was fractious. Um, because even if the emperor, a new, one of the sons of the emperor survived, and you destroyed the invading army, and you tried to then sort of reestablish the imperial lineage, it doesn't matter, because it already happened. It's lost its magic. If you can kind of catch my drift now. It's no longer auspicious. And the auspiciousness in some sense was built into the Confucianism, but it was only uncoded by the Tao. Which also I think has some kind of value, because very clever people will have a sense of the Tao even as they're learning the etiquette, the codes, the protocols, you can seemingly experience some of the one in the other, but only after you pay the toll, you pay the keeper or something like that, or you now in Confucianism this is very embodied in the practices of the things that you do. That when someone wants to talk to you, you put out your sitting mat, and then you sit on your sitting mat, and then you talk to your student, showing him the due care and of propriety that you put into the exchange, into having the discourse, that because in some sense you are there for instructing him that the master is duly saddled with some etiquette that he must be careful about observing, so as to, I don't even know what all the Confucian things, how they are framed. They're all framed in descriptions. They're all framed in because sort of disharmony leads to this, leads to that. It's a whole rationalization chain of causes and effects that essentially sow discord, and they sow, but I mean, in my view, this is all essentially properly addressed when you see the gap between the old fisherman and Confucius himself, which is really the crux of the whole sort of, or the key also to this whole sort of thing. And I wonder, I do think that the Chinese are modernizing their people. I think that's exactly what they are doing. They are having to recreate cultural history, but they're doing it not in an uncontrolled way. They're doing it in a controlled way from the top down, because that is part of the Chinese way. It's part of the Chinese historical lineage, It's in the language, I would dare say, as well. So they are doing their best to assimilate modernity. It's just like, don't expect them, eat, or eat. Oh, I can't remember. There's a phrase I'm trying to remember it from a comedian that said it. Which is like, don't talk with your mouth full, and let's get you on solid food, because at the beginning you give a child milk. You give it milk before you give it solid food. You don't just go straight to solid food. Would you really think that there aren't people in China that are clever enough to get around the locks on their phones in terms of how many hours you can spend doing something? Or then you have to be able to have the money to buy a second phone. So when you run out of time on the one phone, then I don't know. I mean, so all these people are sort of getting around the rules. I imagine. I mean, I have no idea. But at least there's a baseline kind of standard benchmark that is being put there, which is supposedly for people's own good. I mean, I guess, if it actually, imagine you're about to do something, you're looking at something, and now the time expires and the thing turns off in front of your face. The thing turns off and you just got to the good thing. You actually, you were searching, you're browsing. You finally found the thing that you were looking for, and now your time expires and now it gets cut off. What can you even do then? I guess you can be frustrated against the system. Unless the system can actually give you everything that you wanted, that you expected, So now you're kind of in this very interesting dyad of paternalism. I mean, at some point, people need freedom, they need liberty, but they also need to have the accountability and the responsibility to do that. Now, obviously, that sort of arenic dynamic has to be established. It has to grow. It has to, and it is nice when children can actually see, let's say, metaphors of their own gripes, their own concerns, their own, we all grow into quite often the same types of issues, and they're either going to be solved by education, by knowledge, by, let's say, technological advancements, and so like all of these things have stable solutions. But sometimes there's some solutions that we don't want to have the answers to, because it robs us of the chance to sort of to grow up or to develop. So it's sort of like maybe this human container can actually adapt itself into a kind of cul-de-sac of madness. I mean, if I can put it like that. Like, if you remove all the mystery in the world and there's nothing for your understanding to unlock, is there a reason to develop understanding? Is this sort of the conundrum here that underlies this whole kind of theme. And the West is excellent at bootstrapping this to some degree. Well, I say the West. If the West includes continental Europe, probably not. Continental Europe is got a kind of go along to get along, but we'll tell you how to go along so that you can get along. I mean, that's a very low-grade generalization of continental Europe, but I think that it all has to do with their legal theory. It really does have to do with the concept of justice. Because, your conception of justice will at some point reflect on the dignity of the individual in your society. Is justice defined by the majority? Is it at the pleasure of the majority? Who is your king? Is democracy the king of you? Because you know what the curse of kings are, is that you always have to ask, is the king one of the prophets? And even if you have to ask the question, the problem is that the answer is no. The king is not one of the prophets. You shouldn't have a king that is one of the prophets, because then that gift is gone from your spiritual life. You can't find it yourself. You can't understand it yourself, because you'll just be handed it to you. So the correct answer is no. So we want to say no, the king is not one of the prophets. That's what we want to say. But that's the problem, is that how do we know we have to say no to the false prophet. We have to know a false prophet when we see one. And that requires a different kind of knowledge. That even requires more knowledge than the knowledge of God. That requires the knowledge of the world as well. You have to understand not only the spirit of God, but also the spirit of man, so that you can know the contradistinction. The discerning spirit. The spirit of the Lord, the spirit of judgment and understanding and knowledge. So, and this requires, there are lots of things that we're missing. We're missing many contexts, but we're also missing fundamental knowledge of psychology, which has been my essential work. And, anyway, I mean, anyway. Let me not recapitulate the state of my work. I mean, I'm constantly making progress. I do think I have all the puzzle pieces in front of me. It's just, I mean, I haven't run out of money yet, but I would like to buy some materials that I essentially can't afford, that and food. But man, I mean, this sounds like a You see, this is the problem. It's so profane. What's more profane is that, I don't know. I mean, I could just get the money from my parents, but they don't respect me enough not to torture me over it. Um, and if I court their disdain too much, uh, there's some real dangers involved. If I stoke the ire of my parents, there's a place for me. I mean, it's sort of it's a lunatic asylum, or it's living hard on the street. And then where is my research then? I mean, so I'm sort of always between a rock and a hard place, uh, surrounded by sullen children. Sorry, I mean, not calling everyone a sullen child, but I saw a terrible quote. I wonder if I saved it. I think it was like a Heraclitus quote or something. I'm not even sure who Heraclitus was, what school he was in, but I don't know. He was some kind of advanced Stoic, I would think. Um, Going from the quote, it said something like, "There is nothing in this world so cruel or so tragic or so sort of something like loathsome than a man who knows much or has much wisdom and no power to see it implemented." Was kind of the gist of it. I've kind of butchered it quite horribly, but anyway. Um, wow, you see, I'm always indulging in this disgusting form of self-pity, and I haven't even finished my own work.